All right, Dane, we do a weekly draft podcast, so it's not as if this snuck up on us. We've been anticipating the real start to draft season for a while, but even still, it kind of feels like the bat signal went off. Like when the beginning of the draft order is finalized, when the Raiders secure the number 1 overall pick and the first 10 to 15 selections in this upcoming draft are now set in stone, it really feels like the start of something new. Like when did that signal go off for you? Was it when the Giants beat the Cowboys? Was it later on Sunday? Like when did you get that, when did your bat phone ring on Sunday?
It was during the Steelers-Ravens game when during the NBC telecast, they put up because the draft's in Pittsburgh this year, they have a countdown and they showed it, and it's like 108 days until the draft. And the level of anxiety that I got was through the roof because it's like, oh my gosh, we're almost under 100 days until the draft's going to be here. And just feels like there's so much more work to do, even though we've been working on this since June. So yeah, that's when it went off for me. And it's good to have the draft order now, like that, at least the first 18 picks. Instead of just speculating about what the order is going to be. The next domino is going to be the underclassmen. That's a pretty big one, obviously, especially with the quarterbacks, Dante Moore especially. What will he decide to do for next year? And we could be waiting. The deadline's the 14th or 15th, and then it's actually later for the teams that make the national title game. So if Oregon beats Indiana, we'll be waiting even longer to find out what Dante Moore decides to do. And so, that's the next big domino to fall, and then we can get into All-Star season, combine and all that. But yeah, it's upon us.
I feel like we are a team looking for a coach that has to wait for the Super Bowl run to be over. Like we're just waiting to find out if Dante Moore is part of this draft class or not and how that's going to affect things. Real quick before we get into this, we call it building the beast because we're just trying to identify as many prospects as possible. I don't often ask you about the state of the actual beast. Like how many words are written at this point? Like where do things stand with the actual book? Because I got to imagine that's what gave you anxiety when you saw that countdown is like, holy shit, I got a lot of words to write.
I'm looking at my document right now. Right now, it's at 204,875 words. So, we're in a good shape in terms of like I've been doing this a lot of years, so I know that I'm in good shape. Yet there's still that little bit of panic that because there's so much more to do, and it's like, and there's not any big surprises at this point in the process. Like we kind of know who is who, and it's more about just nailing these guys down. Like we have a good idea that this player is going to be a 2nd or 3rd round pick. This player is going to be a 4th round pick. At this point, it's about getting some of those details, verified measurements, getting to see these guys up close and personal, getting to talk to. I've talked to probably, I don't know, over half, probably 65% of these prospects that are going to be drafted. So the next 2 months is all about filling in those gaps for me, in terms of the beast and getting that done. So yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done, but I think we're okay with where we're at, but still a lot of work to do.
200,000 words at the outset of the real part of the draft process. That's why you are the best in the business, my friend. All right, so this is how we're going to do the show. Obviously, there are still 3 big college football games to play this season. The semifinals are at the end of this week, and obviously the national championship game. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but for our purposes, we covered a lot of ground in the quarterfinal preview. We're not trying to tell anybody who's going to win these games or what's going to happen on Thursday and Friday night. We know who the principal players are and what to look for from an NFL perspective. If you want to go re-listen to that, or if you're new to the show, you can go check that out if you want to get a better idea of what's coming on Thursday and Friday. But instead of going super deep on those matchups, I want to take this opportunity. We did this during the season. And it's funny to think about how different it looked back then, because even with a month to play in the season, so much has changed in the draft order. Teams got hot at the end of the year. You could argue teams won some games that maybe they shouldn't have tried so hard to win, but that is all water under the bridge at this point because like I said, the first 18 picks in this draft are finalized. So we wanted to just take a look at the overview of the top of this draft now that we really know what to expect. Like I said, Las Vegas has the number 1 pick in this draft. It didn't even matter what they did against the Kansas City Chiefs because the New York Giants beat Dallas on Sunday afternoon. So you would think that this starts with the Raiders and how much they love Fernando Mendoza. It seems like that's going to be the storyline at the top. Dane, I've already seen the photoshops. Did you see the video of Raiders fans like singing Fernando by ABBA outside of their stadium the other day? Like,
That's a thing?
It's starting to really build momentum here. So that's going to be the predominant talking point at the very top of this draft, and we'll see how the season finishes for Fernando Mendoza. But going down the top of this draft order, I am struck by how this whole thing could hinge on the New York Jets, who fall into the number 2 overall pick at 3 and 14, and what might be in front of them for a variety of reasons in this draft cycle.
Yeah, it's interesting with because you mentioned the teams that won and how that kind of changed these little things. And Kevin Stefanski didn't really care about the draft order. He knew he might not have a job the next day, so of course he's going to try and win in Cleveland. The Giants, those guys don't care. But it is interesting when we look back how those little tweaks could mean the difference between getting player A or player B. And, you mentioned the Raiders. Yes, they did win and it didn't matter. But that win over the Chiefs, instead of having the first pick in every round, it means that instead of having that 33rd pick, the first pick on day 2, which we know is pretty valuable, they're picking 36. Because if you're tied, if you have the same record with other teams, the order will rotate every single round. And so those little things, we don't.
You're a stickler for the details, and I appreciate that about you.
It's something that we can look back at and see how much it matters. But it is interesting, and I think obviously the Raiders, it starts there. I don't think it's as simple as saying that the draft starts at number 2 because the Raiders. It's not like Fernando Mendoza is not the Drake May, Caleb Williams, like he's going to go number 1, no question about it. Type of prospect. Now, is he the clear favorite? Absolutely.
Okay, I love that you're starting here because we talked about this last week. We talked about it last week of whether like it's just Mendoza and you don't need to think that much about it. And we both like Fernando Mendoza, but I think good of you to remind me that maybe you can't write that off right away. It's hard for me to imagine with where the Raiders have been over the last couple years and the fact that they just did another one and done coach and now Tom Brady's involved. It feels way too plausible that the very energetic, very, happy-go-lucky, like charismatic quarterback prospect in Mendoza who has just done all this stuff for Indiana. It feels too plausible that he's the guy.
Just wait till we get the combine and the quotes about him being too robotic and the dynamics of his personality just aren't going to fit an NFL locker room. Just wait. I'm telling you, it's coming. I promise you those things will come up during the combine or during parts of this draft process. And look, he's just a very buttoned up, kind of straightforward person. And, because of that, I think that there will always be a respect level for him, in an NFL locker room. But it's the type of things that when you are under that number 1 overall pick type of microscope, these are the things that get talked about, and Mendoza will not be immune from that. So,
I love it. And look, I've seen Mendoza's post game interviews. He comes across, like robotic, and he seems like he's got a script memorized when he talks to the reporter after the game. And I get it if that maybe puts you off a little bit, but it's still wild to think that we could be criticizing the guy for being too buttoned up and too professional. Like,
and we're not saying that.
You're too ready for this stage, Fernando. Like, that's kind of wild.
Let me clarify. We're not saying this. We're anticipating what the noise is going to be.
People are going to find a reason to pick a guy apart no matter what, for sure.
I do think it's interesting though. Like, you compare him to, instead of comparing him to the first 3 picks 2 years ago, Caleb, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, instead of doing that, because I think that's unfair. I don't think anybody would argue that. I mean, maybe some would, but I don't I certainly wouldn't, that Fernando Mendoza's on that level. But the number one pick last year with with Cam Ward, two very different styles of quarterback. I wouldn't be surprised if some prefer Mendoza, just his style of play, while some others might prefer Cam Ward. And, Ward is a little more reckless, but he's a lot more physically talented and just has a little more to him. Where Mendoza, a little more buttoned up as a quarterback with his process and taking care of the football. And so it comes down to your coach, which we know the Raiders don't have a coach right now. And so that process will be interesting to see how this goes. But obviously Mendoza, clear favorite to go number one overall at this point. But I mean, I think you mentioned the Jets now at number two. It's crazy the kind of the all-time just worst season they had, and it's like, where do you go from here? We I think everyone knows the no interceptions for that defense and how crazy that is. I was blown away. They didn't have a single player over 400 receiving yards, which is in a 17-game schedule. Like, that's bonkers to me. And I get it. The quarterback situation's bad. Garrett Wilson went down with an injury, so the receivers were terrible. But you're telling me even Breece Hall getting all those screens, or a tight end, or like, you couldn't get 400 yards? I mean, that's, to me, the worst team that I've ever seen in my 30 years watching football. The 99 expansion Browns were as bad as it gets, and they had 3 players over 400 receiving yards. So it's amazing to me how bad that of a state that team was in this year. It'll be interesting though, because this is not a quarterback or bust type of pick. They have too much draft capital the next 2 years to settle for someone that they don't love. So if Dante Moore does come out and he's there, or say something crazy happens at 1, it's not a foregone conclusion that they go quarterback here. And it'll be really interesting, especially if Dante Moore does come out, because this isn't a slam dunk quarterbacks go 1-2. I like Dante Moore. He's naturally accurate. He's got mobility. But, if you watch that Texas Tech game, he gets gun shy at times, especially when he's under pressure. He's a smaller framed quarterback. So, he's an inexperienced player too. He has under 20 starts. So not everyone's going to be smitten with Dante Moore as a no doubt about it top 3 type of quarterback. So, I think that's just important to keep in mind. Now, maybe the Jets will see him that way, but it's not a foregone conclusion. So if he's still on the board, Dante Moore, could he go 3 to Arizona? Could we see the Browns make a move? So I think that could get really interesting if Dante Moore does declare. But this is also a draft where there's not that clear non-quarterback, the Myles Garrett, a Bosa, those types of guys, where the Jets, if they don't go quarterback, it's naturally, oh, well, then, we've got this guy waiting for us that's vastly going to improve our roster. Number 2 becomes, I think, a real wild card.
Even if Dante Moore is not that guy that everybody's sold, it goes number 2 overall. Like, even if it's not that clear cut, the Jets have to be hoping and praying that he declares. Just to give them the quarterback to evaluate. Because I think it's a very good point by you that Mendoza shouldn't be written in stone. But I will take the easy money and say I think that's what's going to happen at the end of the day.
Very fair.
And so to have the extra quarterback to give you a shot to draft that guy if you want to, or to just make that pick valuable, because odds are somebody will want Dante Moore at number 2. Like some team that really needs one, I like the odds that they would be willing to jump up if he's available. And so at the very least, you either have the choice to draft him if you want to, or try to sell that pick to the highest bidder. And that's what makes this so fun for the
Dante
Jets,
Moore,
in my opinion.
He was born in Cleveland. I'm just saying, you never know.
We're going to talk about that. So I want to hit on a handful of the teams that interest me the most at the top of this draft process, and the Browns are obviously one of them. But yeah, I mean, yes, they are one of those teams where it's like, hey, we're at 6. If we like this guy this much, is that realistic to think he would be sitting there for us, or can we do what Jacksonville just did last year and jump up 3 or 4 spots and try to get our guy? The Jets have to be hoping Dante Moore declares, because it just makes that pick so much more valuable, in my opinion.
No, you're 100% right, because even if the Jets aren't sold, just having that position of power where Dante Moore in this draft class does change the equation a little bit, because you would think that the Cardinals will be in play there at number 3 potentially. There's a lot that's going to play out in free agency in this offseason with the quarterback carousel, but there's just not a lot of options. If you need a quarterback, Malik Willis, Kyler Murray, it's just that there's very few options that you can point to and say, like, yeah, that clearly makes us better, and it's worth what it's going to take money wise, draft capital wise, to go get him. So it's just going to be a weird quarterback offseason for the teams that don't have a quarterback. And the Browns are definitely in that. And, with Kevin Stefanski no longer there, obviously who they hire is going to play a big part in that process. If the draft were tomorrow, I think that there's a better chance the Browns are probably looking at addressing a non-quarterback. You look at the offensive line, you look at receiver, aside from quarterback, those are clearly the two bleakest positions on the roster. So if you're the Browns and you're picking at 6, you're crossing your fingers that no offensive linemen and no receivers go in the top 5, which is possible. So, I mean, basically, I think you're crossing your fingers that Jordan Tyson and Spencer Fano, Arizona State receiver, offensive tackle from Utah, those 2 guys are still on the board at 6, or at the very least one of them. So you can address one of those key positions on your roster.
That's the other thing I keep thinking about, and it pertains to the Jets as well. And we'll see how this all evolves. We don't even know if Dante Moore is going pro. And we also we don't know for sure how the league is going to view him. Maybe he even declares and he's just not a slam dunk to be a top 2 or 3 pick the way that he kind of feels right now, because quarterback drives so much of this conversation. I'm dying to know which players NFL teams will view as, like, who's that, other than quarterback, who's that next guy off the board? Because we've been talking about it all year. It's hard to identify that guy. Like, who would go number 1 in this draft if it wasn't a quarterback? And the Jets and some of these other teams having to make that decision, I think, is so interesting, because it's just not an easy name to pick, in my opinion.
I mean, it feels like yesterday when people told me for sure that Justin Fields is going to be a top 3 pick. Like, that's it. It's going to happen. Okay, that didn't happen. And you go back even further with Josh Allen or Lamar. Like, there's plenty of quarterbacks that showed plenty of talent that it wasn't as simple as they went 1, 2, 3, or it's just this
very rarely is. Like, 2024
no.
was so rare where 3 badass quarterbacks come out and they go 1,
right.
2, 3.
I mean, the year before when we had Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, they went 1, 2, and so, like, it's we've seen both. Like, every draft has its own persona. Every draft is different, and so I think the way that this draft is shaped, based off of Dante Moore's decision, and then based off of some of the dominoes in free agency and some of these other moves, it will be really fascinating to see it play out. This will be one of the more unpredictable top 10s that I can remember, just because every draft board is going to look very, very different. And it both offense and defense. Jeremiah Love, Kenyon Sadiq. Like, I think those 2 guys are 2 of the top 10 players in this draft. But we're talking a running back, tight end. Are not every team's going to be on board drafting those positions that high. Arvell Reese, who is very much in the conversation, in my opinion, to be the best player in this draft. He's he's not a tweener, but he is a hybrid where you can play him off the ball, you can play him as an edge rusher, but what's his best position? That's going to look a little bit different from team to team, scheme to scheme. So this is a very unpredictable draft because of all the varying decisions and opinions of these players from board to board, team to team.
I also want to highlight the other New York team, the Giants, officially picking 5. I thought it was noteworthy. Obviously, they bring back general manager Joe Schoen, which we weren't sure was going to happen for a lot of this year. He'll be leading this draft process, whether you agree with that or not. And what I thought was interesting at his press conference, basically saying that he's coming back, was he was talking about how appealing his job is because of the play of Jackson Dart, which I agree with. I thought the whispers and the chatter about the Giants drafting another quarterback again this year, I never agreed with. I think Jackson Dart has shown you plenty to be worth another year. But I do think it's fun when the general manager says that, where he's like, "Hey, this guy is what makes this job appealing." And we'll see who the Giants hire, but I hear that and I'm thinking like, "Okay, who are you drafting to make Jackson Dart's life easier in 2026?" Obviously, when you finish as poorly as the Giants did, they have needs all over the place. I'm sure they'd love to add to their secondary, but I hear that and I'm like, okay, receiver, offensive line, are we doing the Jeremiah Love thing? Like, what are we doing to help Jackson Dart in 2026?
Yeah, and that makes sense that you do what you can to help your young quarterback. But I wouldn't be surprised if they went defense either because like you look at these Ohio State guys and Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, like what they would bring to that Giants defense would be, an immediate upgrade and just proven football players. Like those guys, there's no such thing as a sure thing, but those guys feel like they have less risk. Like you just have a good idea of what you're getting with those players. So, and I don't think this is a organization that looks like they need to make a splash here. They just want to get a proven football player that makes sense for this roster that you can build around. And I think one of these Ohio State guys would make perfect sense for them. But yeah, to your point, I mean, I mentioned how the Browns at 6 are going to be hoping that a receiver or offensive lineman are still there. The Giants at 5, right in front of them, could be one of those teams that could snipe a Jordan Tyson or one of these offensive linemen right in front of them. So the Giants I think, are a little wide open with the direction they go here.
We already talked about the Browns, but I wanted to follow up with you. You've been on it from the beginning that they're going to need to be aggressive at the quarterback position. And we can't know that for sure until we know how many quarterbacks we're working with. But where do you stand on that with this current landscape, with them playing themselves all the way up to number 6 in this draft order?
Yeah, it's the reason they wanted Cam Ward last year. That they saw it as a one quarterback draft. If the Browns had a chance to get Cam Ward, they would have. Titans weren't playing. They wanted the quarterback. Totally understand. They traded back, and partly because they wanted some draft ammo this year so they could be aggressive to get that quarterback. This quarterback class did not turn out the way any of us thought. And again, that's not media driven. And a lot of NFL teams were very excited about the potential of this quarterback class. It just didn't come to fruition. So what does that leave? Where does that leave the Browns with? Okay, do they take the same approach where okay, we're not going to get Mendoza if Moore's here, if they really like Dante Moore, but they're not able to get him because the Jets are smitten with him at 2. Do they take the same approach where you take the good football player or try to trade back and then look at next year? Obviously Shador being on this roster, and Andrew Berry was the driving force drafting Shador. Andrew Berry is back as the GM in Cleveland. Do they make another aggressive move for Malik Willis just to bring in? Because I like Shador is very up and down, more down than up. Like it's watching that game against the Bengals. The Bengals are terrible on defense, and aside from that final drive, Shador just had trouble moving the football, and the turnover-worthy plays were just really frustrating to watch. But if I'm fine with bringing him back on the roster. You have to at least bring in competition. What does that look like? What is the best avenue to do that? Whether that's a Malik Willis or somebody in this draft, that'll be interesting to watch just to see how they attack things.
Well, yeah, we're repeating ourselves, but so much changes every year. It'll all look different when free agency gets rolling, but specifically, so many of these teams that could shape the draft order, I expect to change their quarterback situation before we get to the draft. I mean, I guess you can't rule it out with a coaching change now that Jonathan Gannon is out in Arizona, but I'd still be kind of surprised if Kyler Murray's back in Arizona next year. Obviously, the Browns would probably like to cover themselves at quarterback heading into the draft. The Miami Dolphins at number 11 look like a team that could do something major at quarterback after the way it went down with Tua this year. And they're all the way back at number 18, but throw in the Vikings as well, with probably wanting to cover themselves against JJ McCarthy. So that's That's a lot of quarterback movement, and that doesn't even include the Colts and what might be in front of them. Obviously, they don't have a first-round pick because of the Sauce trade, but this feels like it could be a very active year of musical chairs for starting quarterbacks.
And not a very
Not a
fun
very good
version.
pool of
Yeah,
options to choose from.
I mean, it will be interesting, but not fun. Not a lot of great options out there. So yeah, it would not. If you're the Patriots, if you're one of these teams, I know that the season did not go great. If you're the Commanders, but you can feel good that you have your quarterback. You can have solace in that you're at least you're not one of these teams just searching in the sand for capable quarterback play.
I'm glad you said that, because that is one of the most interesting things about the top of this draft to me is every now and then you'll have misfortune strikes a team, and a team with a franchise quarterback, a team that we expected to see in the playoffs, will have a bad year. That's not that weird, but we got it 3 times in the top 10 of this draft. The Washington Commanders, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Cincinnati Bengals all entered the season with hopes of winning their division and competing for a Super Bowl. I looked it up before the show. They were all top 10 in preseason odds to win the Super Bowl before the season started. Obviously,
because of their quarterbacks.
Yeah, exactly. And so 3 teams who we know have franchise quarterbacks are picking in the top 10 of this draft. And it's very fun. It's very exciting to see what they prioritize. I mean, for teams that we expect so much of, the list of needs is long, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's crazy that the Commanders played in the NFC title game last year, and you go look at it now and you're like, man, they need help at edge rusher. They could use some help at corner. They could probably use a safety.
Running back?
The
Jeremiah
running
Love?
back room is not as deep as you might want. Receiver behind Terry McLaurin was never deep. There's no shortage of paths they could choose. Obviously, the Bengals have needed everything on defense forever, and Trey Hendrickson is probably out this offseason, so that's something else to consider. And then again, the Chiefs, I think they'll be fine in the long run, but I'm sure they would like to retool pieces of their defense. They could use a Travis Kelce replacement. They need running back help. Their receivers kind of underwhelmed this year, so there's no shortage of ways you could do this for all of these teams, but it is fun to see all of them holding such big picks.
Well, that's why I said it's going to be a very unpredictable top 10 when you have the teams at the top that could go quarterback, might not. And these 3 teams, especially, where they could go in a lot of different directions. When you have a Jeremiah Love out there, when you have a Kenyon Sadiq out there, you could absolutely, Chiefs can make the case that Sadiq is the best player available on the board when they're picking at 9. And they don't know how to pick at 9. The last time they picked at 9 or in the top 9 picks, Patrick Mahomes was in middle school.
Because it was Eric Fisher, wasn't it?
Yeah, 2013. I believe Patrick Mahomes was in 8th grade that year. So yeah,
so old.
Very. I think that's the first year we met, I believe. I mean, it's been a long road.
That's so wild that 2013 was when you and I started working together, and
That's
so
crazy.
For a lot of reasons it feels like it was yesterday, but then you're like, yeah, Patrick Mahomes was in 8th grade, and I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah, Patrick Mahomes is in his 8th year or whatever it is now. So, they really could go in a lot of different directions because you hit on those surface level needs, and those will change obviously in free agency, and how there will always be some surprise cuts, and I would also just caution people that so many people just look at the draft in the first round and the top 10 and say, oh, what's our biggest need? Oh, pass rusher, boom, okay, that's what's going to be. It's just not that simple. Every year shows us that teams will think outside the box a little bit. They'll bet on traits at a different position. They'll bet on, they're forecasting to not just next year's roster, but 2-3 years from now and what's coming down the pike as going to be a need on this team. So, it's just not that simple. And especially in a draft like this, we could definitely see some surprise picks when we get to that point in the draft.
I'm so glad you said that because I was formulating an early take.
Ooh, bring it.
I think it's easy to look at the Chiefs and say they need a Travis Kelce replacement. Like, I think a lot of people are going to circle Kenyon Sadiq. I think a lot of people would circle Jeremiah Love. I think, the Chiefs tried that with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Jeremiah Love is obviously a vastly better prospect than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Like I said, receiver. I think there's a million things that people would want to mock to the Chiefs that all sound very exciting. He would be fun almost anywhere, but Kansas City would be like my A1 Caleb Downs landing spot. Get him in there with Spags and the amount of hats that he can wear and the amount of stuff that he can do. I think it would be super exciting. I think it would confuse a lot of people who don't pay closer attention. And I would be like, yes, let's get back to the Chiefs that won Super Bowls with their defense being so badass. I think that would be awesome.
I was thinking the same thing about the Bengals and what Caleb Downs would bring to that.
Like I said, there aren't very many
yeah.
teams. There aren't very many teams where Caleb Downs wouldn't be a good pick.
Exactly. Both. I mean, what he brings, like he'll instantly be one of the leaders on the team, and he was outstanding against Miami. Like Ohio State offense struggled. The defense played pretty well, especially the studs. The stars of the Ohio State defense played really. Sonny Styles missed his first tackle and the whole entire season, and he still had a really good game. Caleb Downs was awesome. And nothing happened in that game to hurt those guys from being the top picks they're going to be.
Yeah, again, I mean, Cincinnati could use everything.
It's going to be a defensive player, though, right?
Particularly on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah, for
right
sure.
And Sharpie, right? I mean, it's got to be a defensive player. They need so much help on that side of the ball, especially with, like you said, Trey Henderson likely not being back. And there's always turnover. Right? I mean, Joseph Asai probably not back. Not that he's a difference maker on that team, but there's always turnover on the roster anyways. And so the Bengals are going to be in a position where they can draft one of these, Keldrick Falk. There's a lot of different ways they could address the defense. But yeah, it will get interesting. And I think, like I said, we could see a few surprises where someone like Mansour Delane, corner out of LSU, who's not super toolsy. He's not going to overwhelm anybody at the combine with, he'll be fine in terms of speed, but he won't be a 4.3 guy. And he'll be fine in terms of size, but he's 5'11", 190, not very long. But he's just a really good football player. Like, I like him a lot more than Jedi Barron, who was drafted 20th last year. And a lot of people thought Jedi Barron was a top 12 pick. And I think Mansour Delane's a better prospect. So, if Delane gets into the top 10, to me, that is not a surprise in this draft class.
I've brought it up with you a million times because corner is such an important position. And this doesn't feel like a year with that, no doubt about it, top 10 type of pick. But you look at Delane, maybe Avion Terrell at Clemson. We've talked about Jermod McCoy.
Jermod McCoy's that's the one where a lot will hinge on the medicals, obviously, coming off the ACL and what does he run at the combine, assuming he runs. But that 2024 tape is first round, top 15 type of tape. So there's always risk involved, but at least that we're a year removed from that injury, we'll have the complete medicals and we'll be able to see him move. And so if Jermod McCoy still ends up going top 7 in this draft, to me, that should not surprise anybody.
This is a perfect illustration of my point, though. The likely top 2 choices are a guy who didn't play in 2025 and a guy who dominated in the SEC, but might not have the measurables and the testing that really get you excited and make you feel confident about that. But scarcity is a hell of a thing. And so I like trying to pinpoint where a guy like that would go is very fun because you're looking at it and you're like, oh, I feel better about this at 12 or 13. But if you're convinced that the drop off is severe, then yeah, why would you be surprised to see that guy go 6 or 7?
People need to change their perceptions they have to do it every draft class, like just in one draft class, Brock Bowers would go top 3. In this draft class, Brock Bowers would be a top 5 pick. But, 2 years ago, he was the 13th pick just because of the quarterbacks in that draft and the high-end talent in that draft. So everyone has to change their perception of what a number 1 overall pick looks like in a guy like Fernando Mendoza, who's not on the level of those guys that we talked about before, But if the Raiders believe he'll be a top 15 quarterback in the league, that like at some point in the next 3 years, he can get to that level or on that rookie contract, then you pull the trigger. You go that's who you draft at number 1 overall. And so I think you just, based on what the draft gives you every year, because every draft is different, has its own identity, you have to just alter your perception a little bit in terms of, oh, well, this in most drafts, this player will go 14th or whatever it ends up being. So this draft more than ever got to change your perception and understand, okay, what is he going to be? Instead of comparing a player to past drafts, compare him to what does he bring to our team? What's the impact that he gives us? And is there anybody else that brings a better impact? If not, then screw it. That should be the player. That should be the pick, because that's going to make the biggest impact for your team.
One more team I wanted to hit on before we move on to the rest of the show. I think it's worth mentioning, again, when we did this however many weeks ago, it looked like the Rams were going to have a top 10 pick. And they still have a pretty good pick by virtue of the trade with Atlanta. Ironically, Atlanta beat them in that fantastic Monday night game that hurt the Rams pick. So now they own Atlanta's pick at 13 overall. Atlanta finished the season really strongly to get to 8-9. So you have the 13th pick, and we'll see what their own pick is. It'll be in the 20s or maybe even the 30s. But I'm very intrigued by how the math changes there, because the Rams quarterback hunting no longer feels as plausible as it did, or maybe they're that crazy. I mean, this is one of the most aggressive front offices in the NFL. They have draft capital for the first time in forever. Maybe they try it anyway, but I'm very interested in how the Rams approach this, where you have a quarterback who's in the twilight of his career. We don't know that Matthew Stafford's done, but you'd be crazy not to be thinking about that. But are you in position to do anything about it? Or do you just try to load up your offensive line or draft an heir to Devontae Adams? I don't know. Like, it's so much murkier now that this is pick 13 instead of like pick 7.
Right. And yeah, Stafford, he's going to be 38 this offseason, obviously coming off MVP level year, but who knows how long he wants to play. So, that will play a part in what they do. I'm looking forward to them drafting Kenyon Sadiq and just running 14 personnel, next season, and just changing the rules of.
You can't. You're gonna get another Oregon tight end. Just put him on a conveyor belt straight to the Rams facility.
I'm saying that half kidding or mostly kidding.
No, mostly kidding until they do it. Yeah,
exactly. But that my point being, kind of like you said, like the Rams, they kind of think differently, and they in a lot of different ways have been on the forefront of, hey, we think this could work. Let's lean into it. And so seeing the direction they go at 13 will be a lot of fun. And I think that, obviously they're a team that is set up to compete for the Super Bowl. And so there's not a ton of needs, but, could they use an upgraded corner? Could they use, there's obviously places they could address. But could they make a splash when you're drafting or this high, which they don't expect to be drafting this high very, very often? That will be fun to watch. And I've mentioned Sadiq a few times. I think one thing, to me, he's a top 12 level player in this draft, but something that might hurt him is this is a deep tight end class. I think edge rusher, linebacker, tight end, those 3 positions to me, at least with the underclassmen that have declared up to this point, they look like 3 of the most, or at least the deepest positions that this draft has to offer. So that doesn't stop you from drafting a Sadiq, anyone in the top 15, but I think it may be, if you feel good about this tight end class like I do, you feel good about waiting to the 2nd, 3rd round, 4th round and getting a plan B and then going a different way in the 1st round.
There are always teams who feel like they're a piece away. And I know that's a logical fallacy. You're never one piece away, but there are always a handful of teams where the perception of them is that they're a piece away. And we wish cast weapons and, splashy players for those teams. It's very funny to think that the Rams are one of those aggressive teams that's down to do something wild to put themselves over the top. And so having a quarterback who's turning 38, I wonder how they balance that. Whether or not they win the Super Bowl, I wouldn't blame them if that affected their decision making. Like, how close do you come to winning a championship in the next month, and how does it affect just how wild you want to get with it in this draft.
No, you feel like you're playing with house money at that point, where it's like, we just won a Super Bowl. We feel like we can maybe
But
make
if
a
they let's
splash.
say they fall painfully short,
Yeah,
like what do you do? And knowing that you've at best case scenario got like one more year of Stafford, that sounds like a hard place to be. But I think if anybody was going to be stuck in that position, I think I trust Les Snead and Sean McVay to figure it out.
yeah, no, fair point.
All right. That does it for draft talk for now. I mean, we got so much more coming, but we do want to take a little bit of a look at the college semifinals. By this point, I feel like we have a really good idea of what to expect and who's playing. If you're a team, if you're a fan of a team that needs a quarterback, you should watch the Peach Bowl on Friday night. Fernando Mendoza is playing Dante Moore. I can't think of a better selling point for that. But I did want to hit on one guy who we've talked about fairly often on this show, and we joked about it last week. It kind of started off as a little bit of a novelty, and there was Trinidad Chambliss just balling out against Georgia in the college football quarterfinals. He's got a chance to get Ole Miss to the national championship game this week. And I did want to revisit that and get your feelings on what this could all mean. Obviously, we don't know right now. Trinidad Chambliss has applied for a waiver for another year of eligibility. He recommitted to Ole Miss, so he could be right back there in Oxford next fall. But all of a sudden, starting to feel like a much more serious NFL prospect than we were imagining way back in September.
Well, and when we first started talking about him in the fall, like I asked scouts, what do you think about him? And they all said good things, but they weren't really considering him as a serious 2026 prospect because he wanted to go back to school, and Ole Miss was very confident that the waiver would go through. So, and even with the success that he's had here in the playoffs, it still sounds like that's option A for him. He wants that one more year in college. Now, could that change if Ole Miss wins it all? Potentially, right? But I think the main variable here is that waiver, and even if it's denied, because just without going too far into it, he had 2 years that he did not play at Ferris State. One he redshirted, the other one, that's the one they're trying to get a medical redshirt for. So, they have to show documentation that, hey, this was the injury, this is what kept me from playing. And so even if that does get denied, we'll probably see a lawsuit. And, I think there's a better chance that Chambliss is playing in college next year than the NFL, but the door isn't completely closed. And so if he is a part of this class, I don't know, day two certainly feels possible for him. And, all it takes is one team. Every year, there's a reminder of that. Dylan Gabriel was that guy last year. And Chambliss, I mean, he's got the resume of a full resume of big-time throws against SEC competition. He's got the athletic instincts that you want. I think that will really separate him from some other quarterbacks in this class. And he takes care of the football. He has one of the best touchdown to interception ratios in the country. So I'm very excited to see him against Miami in this playoff game, especially we know that pass rush for the Hurricanes and what it can bring. Are they going to just let it loose? Are they going to try and play a little more contain with a guy like Chambliss, who we know can use his legs, which is different than Julian Sayin in Ohio State? So this will be a very good test for the quarterback against that Hurricanes defense. And while what happens in the playoffs probably will determine ultimately what he does, it's more about the waiver, and it sounds like that decision could be coming pretty quickly.
It's so interesting to think about where and I mean, we've been talking about it all year. That's the new landscape of college football, where like I could sit here and say, Trinidad, somebody's going to be willing to make you the 66th overall pick in the NFL draft, and think about the money that comes with that. And that mattered 6 years ago. And right now, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but you hear the reports about what Brendan Sorsby got to go to Texas Tech and what some of these other transfer quarterbacks are getting. I'm sure he will be well compensated to stay in college. Like, it's not the risk that it used to be. And so it's still, as somebody who grew up with the old way, and this has been what I'm used to, it's still weird to think about. But if you
You're
go
not
back,
the only one. I mean,
yeah,
the amount of people on Twitter, the responses I get about, oh, Chambliss, he has to go now, right? Like, look at his age. Look at that's you have to change your thinking. Like, that's just not how guys. This is true regardless of era, but money is not the determining factor for not a lot of these guys. Some of these guys, where it's what's going to get me the absolute max out my bank account. Because you are well compensated, especially quarterbacks, especially SEC quarterbacks. And so you are making good money, and you can't get that year back in college. And that's how a lot of guys think. They're not in a rush to get to the next level, get to the NFL. Some guys are. Not everyone is. And that might be a lot of people think just in terms of money in those terms. And I get it. I'm not saying that's wrong in any way, but that's just not how everyone looks at it, not how everyone feels. And, when we look back in hindsight, could it end up being the wrong decision? Sure. But that's life. We all make our own decisions, and some of us might have regrets. Some of us, but, that's just something that, especially with this specific player, being at an SEC school, when you are the quarterback, it's pretty glamorous, right? Like, I mean, you're the guy. Of course, there's pressure, but there's still it's got to be a lot of fun for this player after being a D2 guy for 4 years, going to the SEC, and all of a sudden kind of being at this level and having these types of resources. And you're not you in some ways you have to be a pro because that's the way college athletics is moving, but it's still not the NFL where you've got 35-year-olds in your locker room relying on you to go make plays. It's still a different dynamic. And so I don't think it's any surprise why him or anybody would want to go back. And this include Dante Moore in this conversation as well. If he goes back to school, people will, the crying from people about how could you pass up that type of money, like if he feels like he's going to be a better quarterback in the long run with one more year in college where he's probably going to be making $5+ million next year, I get it. I mean, that's good for him to make that decision.
Let's be blunt about it too. Like, and of course, not everybody has the same background or has the same need for the money,
Right.
but it used to just be a leverage play though, where like even if you don't need the money, if you get a good report from the NFL and you're going to be whatever, like a top 50 pick, you look at it and you're like, okay, that's not even that like I'm not even going to go top 10, but how am I supposed to turn down this many $1 million in hand? Like I'm putting myself at risk for no guarantee of future money. And even look, let's not be naive. Guys were getting paid under the table all the time in college football before this, but 6 figures and a free Dodge Charger that showed up in your driveway is not the same thing as signing on the dotted line to go back to school and being confident that you're going to make 7 figures, which the quarterback of a football factory is going to make. And so it's just not as scary as it used to be to go back to school.
It's still bizarre seeing these tweets about USC re-signing their quarterback, or like just it's weird, man.
It is like I said, I'm still adjusting to it, but you're so right. Like you have to let that model of thinking go where you're just like, oh, well, the lure of the money is too great to ignore because you could lose everything, where it's like, no, you can still make a lot of money and make yourself a more desirable prospect. And if Trinidad Chambliss could go in the 2nd or 3rd round today, then that means he's got a shot to improve his stock even more next year. And and even if it works out disastrously, he's still going to be paid handsomely to do it. I mean, shoot, let's keep it in the rivalry. Let's bring up our old guy, Garrett Nussmeier. I mean, he lost big this year, but he was still well compensated to do it. And at the end of the day, I saw he accepted a Senior Bowl invite, so he's gonna still go have a chance to prove his bona fides and get drafted into the NFL. So the downside, I just don't think is anywhere near as scary as it was 5-6 years ago.
If teams like you, they usually don't sour on you to the point where it's just disastrous. I mean, Garrett Nussmeier, yeah, he's not gonna be the 1st-round pick like a lot of people thought he could be, but I mean, he could still be a 3rd-round pick, and teams still really like him. So if teams like Chambliss now, I'm sure they'll still like him next year.
Watching him navigate Mesidor and Ruben Bain will be incredibly fun, and he is well suited to do it. I liked him the moment I watched him against, I think it was Tulane, but like,
give you credit, yeah.
You
brought him up first.
I liked him as like a wouldn't this be cool kind of thing. Like, maybe somebody likes him in the 6th or 7th round. I did not see it getting to where it is right now. All right, Dane, in the last little bit of the show, I did want to take a look at the all rookie team, which you are publishing on theathletic.com this week. It's Tuesday.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's out yet.
Thursday, I believe it's up.
So we don't need to run through the entire thing, but we checked in about this at like the quarter mark of the season and the halfway point of the season. And it's funny, when you and I talk, we're mainly talking about guys heading into the draft in 2026. We don't talk as much about what's been playing out over the course of the NFL season. So I'm always curious to pick your brain about this. And I'm just going to run through some ones that really interest me. And let's start right off the jump. Jackson Dart as your first team all rookie quarterback, which halfway through the year, I think we said like Cam Ward was the guy by default, but Jackson Dart's playing great. But I'm a little curious about the guy that you left off of here.
You talking about our guy in New Orleans?
I sure am. I'm talking about Tyler Shough.
Well, part of me wanted to put Tyler Shough there just because I felt like I was one of the bigger Tyler Shough defenders throughout the draft process. Like there were people that they just found out his age and they were like, all right, I'm out. I'm not even gonna.
Yeah,
like,
his age and the fact that he transferred a bunch and one bad throw from the combine.
Like that was some type of disqualifier why he couldn't be a good player. But no, Shough was my runner up ahead of Cam Ward. But look, Jackson Dart, and look, these awards are mostly stat driven. This isn't like who I would want for the next 5 years. This is who put up the best stats and the biggest impact over this rookie year. And with Dart, he had 11 starts. And only one of those was with Malik Neighbors. So I think that's important context. He accounted for 24 touchdowns this year. That was easily the most among all rookie quarterbacks, 7 more than Cam Ward, who had 17. And then you look at all the rate stats, it favors Dart. And then what he brought with his legs as a quarterback, dual threat quarterback. Like he had more rushing yards this year than Alvin Kamara. The only quarterbacks who had more rushing yards were Josh Allen and Justin Herbert. So the impact that he brought, and that's not to say that Cam Ward didn't show a lot of promise and Tyler Shough didn't have a really strong second half. When they benched, who'd they bench in New Orleans? Spencer Rattler. When they benched him, all I heard was, "Oh my, why are they doing this?" I was saying, "It's about time. Like you need to see what you have with the second round pick." And credit to Shough. He was the only quarterback to win over half of his starts. The only rookie quarterback to win over half of his starts this year, which, he wasn't the only reason. There was plenty of, it's a very much a team game, but Tyler Shough was a big part of that, using both his legs and with his arm. He was, I think he at least played to the level where the Saints can go into next year feeling like they have their quarterback for 2026. Now, is he the long-term answer? Time will tell. But for 2026, the Saints can feel like they have their quarterback.
Mainly busting your chops because I said on a show with Robert and Derek a couple weeks ago, like even after everything Tyler Shough has done, if I was starting a franchise with one of these two guys heading into the next season, I would take Jackson Dart because the athleticism and the high level talent, I think it's just too much to ignore. And the stuff you just listed off is very enticing. But just in terms of who played better in 2025, I mean, Tyler Shough was awesome. And maybe some of this is that I hate to say I wrote him off personally. I just wrote off the situation. I didn't think that there was going to be any chance that he would be able to show enough to have this job heading into 2026. And I was dead wrong. I mean, the guy had 2 300-yard passing games. He was a catalyst in their wins, both of their wins against Carolina. He was a big catalyst in the upset at Tampa Bay that kind of sent Tampa's season spiraling. And he even played well against like really good teams that they played. Like his first start against the Rams was nothing incredible, but he looked miles better than I would expect of a guy making his first NFL start against a Super Bowl contender. I just thought over the time that he got to play, he played quarterback more consistently well than any other rookie, even if I would rather have Jackson Dart in the long term.
And I think that's fair because I think Tyler Shuck deserves a lot of credit for the way he played down the stretch and in the way that I don't know, it felt like the entire team responded to him. I don't know, it just felt different watching the Saints second half of the year compared to the first half. And so, like I said, I don't know if he is really the long term answer, but the Saints can feel great about going into 2026, feeling like they have a promising quarterback that could be the long term answer. Maybe he is, maybe he's not, but he could be, and the evidence is all over the 2025 tape.
I don't think anybody's terribly surprised to hear Travion Henderson as the all-rookie running back, runner-up Ashton Genty. Teteroa McMillan and Emeka Ibuka are your rookie receivers, despite late challenges by Jaden Higgins and Luther Burden. I think that's totally fair. I'm tempted to put Colston Loveland on my team if this is my team, but I think it's a good shout by you to have Tyler Warren being one of your tight ends, but also Harold Fannin, who had a remarkable rookie season on a team that was nowhere near as visible as the Bears. I think that's totally fair.
Look at you just embracing your Chicago-ness.
He's been awesome, man.
He has been awesome. And that was, there were so many victory laps, in September about how I can't believe the Bears took Loveland over Warren, and like the overreactions to the first month of the season were kind of hilarious. But it's again, these stats are mostly stat driven, and Tyler Warren and Harold Fannin finished 1 and 2 in rookie tight end catches, receiving yards, receptions of 10+ yards. And the thing with Fannin that the fact that he did it with those quarterbacks in Cleveland and that offense, I love this stat. So two NFL tight ends, not just rookies, 2 NFL tight ends had more than 15 forced missed tackles this year. Trey McBride had 24 and Fannin had 22. Like what he gave to this offense after the catch and moving the chains, it was really made him a difference maker. So to me, like that's why I gave him the edge, even though, yeah, if I was building a team tomorrow, give me Colston Loveland all day. And we saw his impact down the stretch for Chicago, and I'm betting we'll see him make some noise in the playoffs. But for this all rookie team, taking the whole season into account, I'm going to give the edge to Warren and Fannin.
Think about all the ways that Harold Fannin is a unicorn, because like especially at the tight end position, which we famously say is like so hard to transition to the
NFL. Still 21 years old.
It's like you got to be an incredible athlete. Well, he's not like this incredible athlete. He falls to the 3rd round of the draft, and I'll say it if you're not willing to. Like if a tight end falls all the way to the 3rd round, I'm not writing him off as a good player, but I'm probably writing him off as like this rookie star, like it's hard to break into the lineup as a tight end if you're not this overwhelming 1st round pick, like a Tyler Warren or a Colston Loveland or what have you. Then it's like, okay, well, did you at least play at a football factory where you're going against the best of the best? No, he played at Bowling Green. Oh, well, is he at least, like Oronde Gadsden, is he at least playing in an offense with an amazing quarterback like Justin Herbert who can get him the ball? Not really. These quarterbacks are actually pretty bad. And despite all
Connor
of that,
Blazek was all right.
No, I'm talking about in the NFL, though.
Oh, yes, definitely.
And just the guy had nothing working in his favor that typically works for a guy that breaks out like this, and here he is with 700 yards and 6 touchdowns as a rookie.
I think the thing that really helped him was the Brown staff, Stefanski and those guys, Tommy Reese. They really believed in him. I think it was Mays actually who, on his training camp tour after he left Cleveland, he texted me and said, man, the way they feel about Fannin, like he could be a dude this year. And that type of belief and confidence in a player and giving him those opportunities, we saw what it could mean. It's like when talent meets opportunity, and that's Harold Fannin this year. So with David Njoku maybe played his last game in Cleveland, Fannin's going to be the top guy on the depth chart. I mean, he was most of this year anyways because Njoku was hurt. But Fannin, he's going to be the guy who we'll see what they do at receiver in the offseason, but he's going to go into next year as one of their key contributors on offense.
Your offensive tackles, I don't think anybody would be surprised to hear Armand Membu is here. And you listed Will Campbell as a runner-up, which is totally fair. Phenomenal season on his part, but I was really pumped to see you give Kelvin Banks of the New Orleans Saints some love, who, again, very quietly, for even with their late season surge, not a good team. They're picking in the top 10 of the draft, but I thought he was really, really phenomenal without as much visibility as a guy like Will Campbell got.
If Will Campbell played the entire year, because he did have that 4-game stretch where he was hurt, he was out, because Will Campbell played at an exceptional level all year. And I mean, who knows if the Patriots win the NFC East without having that left tackle. But Kelvin Banks played, I mean, he was on pace to play like almost every snap for the Saints this year until he was an ankle injury in week 18. But Banks played at a pretty high level himself. There were some hiccups in pass protection, like you would expect from a rookie. Gave up more pressures than you want to see, but for the most part, Kelvin Banks played pretty well. Membu, to me, was a top tackle that I saw this year.
Well, that's been your guy this whole time.
21 years old, and to play at that level from the start, from the get-go, just awesome. Like, it's funny how, not funny, but ironic, I guess, with the Jets. The question for how long was the offensive line. Now it feels like the offensive line is the only promising part of that team, or at least on offense, moving forward, and Membu's a big part of that.
Looking through the rest of this, again, you can check it out on The Athletic on Thursday. I can't help but notice, selfishly, the Cowboys' first 2 picks of 2025 made your list. Tyler Booker as a first-team interior offensive line. Donovan Ezeraku as a runner-up, but we'll take the silver linings where we can get them.
Yeah, and Ezeraku, I think, was just rock solid all year. He only had 2 sacks, but he did a really nice job in the run game. He had to get 36 pressures. So, he deserves, we talked about, and both Falcons pass rushers, a lot was made of, obviously, the trade up that they made to go get James Pierce. Not that I will say was worth it, because I still don't think it was, but Pierce played, I think, what they were hoping that he would be, in terms of getting to the quarterback, led all rookies with 10.5 sacks, the only rookie to have double-digit sacks this year. That's something that at least the Falcons can hang on to as they kind of bring in a new era next year.
I'm with you. I'm not convinced it was worth it. And the metrics say that Pierce was good, not an overwhelming force or anything like that. But giving up that pick with Pierce sitting on 10.5 sacks feels a hell of a lot better than giving up that pick and he couldn't get on the field or he just wasn't productive. So I will say that.
And Jalen Walker was my other runner-up at edge rusher because he was impactful as well. He would there's a stat called splash plays that our Austin Mock keeps really close tabs on, that really puts together pressures, negative tackles, 3rd, 4th down stops, just really all the negative plays for a defensive player. And Jalen Walker had one of the highest splash play rates, and his impact, I think, goes well beyond what just the stat sheet says and the sacks and those numbers. So both Falcons first-round picks played pretty well as rookies.
So it kind of goes without saying, Abdul Carter was one of your rookie of the year edge or all rookie edge rushers, which makes perfect sense. We haven't talked about this in a minute. Does Carter's late season surge change your stance on defensive rookie of the year? Because I've felt like it was Carson Schwessinger's award to lose for a long time at this point, but we know Carter's got crazy good pressure numbers. He's had good pressure numbers all season. His quick pressure numbers are insane. You add 3.5 sacks to that over the last whatever month of the season it was. I can see it if you think he should be rookie of the year. For me, I think it's still Schwessinger, but what do you think?
I think Schwessinger already has the place on his bookcase picked out for.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Schlesinger, spoiler, but yeah, he's my top linebacker on this all rookie team. I like this stat. So he's the only NFL player this year, not rookie, just NFL player, with over 150 tackles, at least 10 tackles for loss, and at least 2 interceptions. that has it like that's only happened like 2 or 3 times the last 12 years. And like Roquan Smith did it a couple years ago, Luke Kuechly did it, but we're talking about like legit all-pro linebacker play, and Schlesinger did it banged up, by the way. I mean, he was talking to some scouts about what he was working through this year, and it's just amazing he played at this level while being that injured. And eventually he did have to go on IR, didn't play week 18. So he did this all in a 16-game type of season. Schlesinger, to me, and honestly, I think it's Schlesinger. I'd probably go Nick Emenwari, and then Abdul Carter would be my top 3. But, all 3 had really good years.
Emenwari is a good shout, and he is on this list as well, which just looking over your list, what a fun year in the back 7 for the NFL, really. I mean, Schlesinger's amazing. Jihad Campbell tailed off a little bit, but still a very promising rookie season. And then you look through the secondary, Nick Emenwari, Jacob Parrish, and Upton Stout. That's just at nickel. It's disgusting that there's that much competition for like best nickel rookie nickel of the year. Because all 3 of those guys had phenomenal seasons. Xavier Watts and Malachi Starks, with Jonas Sanker and Craig Woodson as the runners up at safety. Even cornerback Quincy Riley in New Orleans, Will Johnson in Arizona. Like, lot of good secondary play from this rookie class now that I'm looking at it all laid out in one place.
Denzel Burke, I mean, the Cardinals have to feel good about their cornerback depth chart going into next year with the way Burke played, Will Johnson played. Noel Williams for the Chiefs, the way he played over the last month of the season was outstanding. He was a guy that
probably had Chiefs fans wondering what the hell took so long, if I had to guess.
And he did have, he was a role player early on. He had his moments, but seeing him get his chance and then playing at the level that he did was awesome. And he was always someone that didn't have the speed. Like, he wasn't a big speed guy, but he had the competitive toughness, the awareness, the physicality. All of that was off the charts. It's just, was he fast enough? I don't know. I mean, I think going into next year, he'll be competing for a starting job, and to me, he belongs in a starting lineup somewhere. But yeah, he's part of that mix. The nickels were crazy this year. Emenwari, Jacob Parrish, Upton Stout, all 3 of those guys got an opportunity, and they ran with it.
I'm straight up mad. If you listen to our shows with Robert and Derek, like, I'm an Upton Stout fan, stan.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I'm mad that he's only a runner-up. But then you look at what Emenwari and Parrish did, and you're like, yeah, no, that's the correct order. But it just speaks to how well they played.
And you can't watch, and also all 3 of those, the Seahawks, the Bucks, the 49ers, you can't watch those defenses play without feeling the presence of that nickel position and what those guys brought to the field. Upton Stout, I give him a lot of credit. Like, I liked him in the process, but he's 5'8.5", 180 pounds. So, like, you don't want to be a sizeist. You don't want to, like, just write him off. And I didn't. I mean, I thought he was a 4th, 5th round pick, but I believe he went in the 3rd round, and he's making this San Francisco 49ers look absolutely right. Emenwari, I'm still shocked that he didn't go in the 1st round. I mean, I think the tape, the traits, it all said 1st round. It all said top 20. And he fell to I was like the 35th pick, so one of the first picks on day 2. And it looks like a steal for the Seahawks. I mean, you felt his presence out there with the way he played every level, whether he's close to line of scrimmage, whether he's in the deep half. You felt what Nick Emenwari brought to the field, and my guy Jacob Parrish, same type of thing.
The lesson I learned from Emenwari, and it's not that, like, I mean, he's an incredible athlete, fun player, but like, where you land matters, right? And
yeah.
From here on out, when I see Mike McDonald draft a defender with a big time pick, I'm going to be way, way more interested, because if he's got a vision for you, then I'm pretty excited to see what it is.
I mean, Byron Murphy 2 years ago in the draft. I mean, Byron Murphy's awesome, and then see what they did this past year. I think you're absolutely right.
You know what? Another lesson I learned just from looking at this, and I think it's prescient given the draft cycle that we're about to head into, but it's easy to act like a draft class is bad or down, or, we don't, where's the star power in this draft? What's the top 10 going to look like? And all that stupid stuff. And then we get to the end of the 2025 season, which people weren't very excited about last year's draft either. And you look at it on paper and you're like, holy shit, there were a lot of good rookies playing good football this year. And it'll be the same case with this one. It
100%.
might not be the top 10, or it might not be the quarterback position, but we're about to draft a bunch of really fun football players into the league.
There's no doubt about it. And I think that I mentioned linebacker, edge rusher, tight end. Those three positions are especially loaded in this class where even if we're not talking about them first round. I mean, the guys second, third, fourth round at those positions will make impacts next year. Xavier Watts was a 96th pick last April. And, he was second in the league in interceptions with 5. So, you think the Falcons feel good about making that pick? Which a surprise he lasted as long as he did, but it ended up working for both sides. And I think that's a really good point because the star power might be lacking in the 2026 class, but there will be plenty of depth at some key positions that will be on the field next year as NFL players and will make an impact.
Looking forward to finding out more about who they are and where they're going to go. We will be doing that all spring. Real quick before we get out of here, though, Dane, you've been doing it to me for the last few weeks, so it's my turn to put you on the spot. We do have 2 college games to play. What is your national championship matchup? Who's winning these semifinals?
Guess I'm gonna go Indiana, Ole Miss. I think Indiana went to Autzen and beat Oregon, so it's hard to do it twice, be at the same team twice, but I think they can do it. And then I'll just go with the better quarterback. It's Carson Beck hasn't had to win a game for Miami, in the playoffs. It's been, just making the right decisions at the line and taking care of the football, not turning it over. He has not had to make, there is not one throw in against A&M or against Ohio State that made you sit up and say, oh, that's an NFL throw. Now maybe he'll be forced to do that in this game and we'll see how it goes. But up to this point, he hasn't had to do it. So I'll go with the better quarterback, even though I don't feel great about it. But I do think that Oregon Indiana game it should be a lot of fun. What about you? What are you going with?
I'm starting to get a team of destiny vibe from Indiana. And we've talked about it all year. Alabama is not that Alabama, but to just wipe them off the field the way that they did and just bully them around on both sides of the ball, it spoke volumes to me. And you add that, the ability to boss a game like that with a quarterback like Mendoza, I just think that's a tough combination to beat. So, I mean,
I was kind of thinking the same thing with Miami, just because of the way that they're clicking at the right time.
I don't completely trust Beck, though. I don't trust Beck
fair.
as much as I trust Mendoza.
Yeah, but it's the defense because there were times this year, throw on the SMU tape, throw on the Louisville tape, and you don't even notice Ruben Bain out there. It was a very up and down season for him in terms of his overall impact. But he's playing, some of his best ball right now. Include Mesidor in that conversation as well. So if the defense, and I mean, I expressed my love for Keontae Scott last podcast, and I'll do it again now because that pick 6 that he had against Ohio State was just unbelievable.
I've never been prouder of us than I was when I know it came against the Buckeyes, but when he picked that off, I was like, man, I'm glad we spent 5 minutes talking about that guy.
There's no more disruptive nickel near the line of scrimmage in college football than Keontae Scott. So the way that I agree with you on Beck, but the way the Miami defense has been playing and the way the offensive line has been playing, they're giving Beck time where he's not forcing things. And Ohio State, they couldn't get to him. So if the defense and the offensive line plays like that at that high of a level, like they did against Ohio State, Miami's going to be tough to beat.
That's kind of where I landed. So I'll take Indiana I think Indiana's going to win the national title based on what we've seen over the last few weeks, but I'll take Indiana. And then it's funny, we applied different logic to the same thing where I'm like, okay, Ole Miss has the better quarterback. I like everything else about Miami more. And that pass rush, Miami's offensive line, I think they win the trenches, and unless Trinidad Chambliss just once again plays the game of his life, which he might,
right?
But I think I'll take Miami to just win the trenches and be the more overwhelming roster. And I'm taking Indiana, Miami.
Part of me just wants to see Lane Kiffin as a living embodiment of the Larry David GIF, where just like, because if Ole Miss wins it all, he gets what, $1 million? I mean, as a bonus, but then he'll have to watch his team win without him. It'd just be a bizarre circumstance that really sums up what college football is right now.
I do my best to be objective, and I'm on the record as a Trinidad fan over the course of the entire season, so you can't take that away from me. But I'd be lying if I said, as an alum of LSU, I don't need that in my life. I don't need to watch my school's coach watch his team make a run to the national title game. Like, that sounds
It'd be bizarre
annoying
to watch. It'd be just something we've never seen before, and I don't know. It'd be not that I'm rooting for it. It'd just be fascinating as hell to watch.
If Ole Miss gets there, it'll be because Trinidad did some awesome stuff. So I'll take solace in that, and we'll see what happens. Dane, love chatting with you as always, man. We'll be back next week. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching. Follow The Athletic Football Show wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube.